Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here is your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome on August Sunday morning to Faith in Our Hometown. We're glad that you joined us on this summer morning to have our conversation, as we do each week, about the things that affect us as people of faith in the greater Joplin area. We often get a chance to talk to other ministers, but I'm going to tell you that if you watch all the time, that I don't get a chance to talk to too many other women Christian ministers because there just aren't that many in the area. And so I managed to snag another one to be on the air with me today. So my guest this morning is going to be the Reverend Dr. Colleen Carroll, who's the pastor of South Joplin Christian Church. And we're going to be back in just a few minutes here to talk a little bit about the challenges of even being a female pastor and what that's like, serving in an area like Joplin. So stick around, settle in, and we are going to be right back after we watch this Mercy Minute to talk to Dr. Colleen Carroll, the pastor of South Joplin Christian Church.
Blessings and greetings of mercy to you. My name is Anna Nichols. I am a Sister of Mercy and currently the leader of Heritage and Spirituality at Mercy International Association. I love the fact that sisters throughout time have gone where they have been called to go, and they have often picked up ministries that they never intended to pick up. 25 years ago, there were 22,000 Sisters of Mercy globally. Today we're down to about 6,200 with Sister Rock and some of the others. But despite the fact there are 6,500 or 6,200 sisters left, there is an amazing number of women and men of mercy who are working alongside us, and that continues to expand and expand, and for me that is incredibly exciting. So as far as National Catholic Sisters Week, I really look at the legacy that they have passed on and the fact that so many women, men, young people are living mercy today. That really is for me what's significant.
Well, again, thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning of Faith in Our Hometown. My guest this morning, the Reverend Dr. Colleen Carroll, pastor of South Joplin Christian Church. So, Colleen, I'm really glad that you joined me this morning. I always enjoy talking to my female counterparts in town, but you guys are hard to find.
That's true.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to the Joplin area, and then we'll talk a little bit about South Joplin Christian, and then we'll talk a little bit about what that's like to be a female pastor in an area like Joplin.
Well, this July marked 5 years for me to be here in Joplin, and prior to that I was at Lake of the Ozarks for about 18 years in ministry. So it's been a long journey for me, and I'm very happy and delighted to be in the role that I am in and in the congregation that I currently serve. Cool.
Yeah, and I always, when I'm traveling certain corridors, you always pass by the same churches. And so you guys are, down there at that,
20th and Wall.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. So, and again, we used to have a Catholic church over near there too, yes, in between, but now they've moved out, St. Mary's, before the tornado. But I used to travel that corridor a lot and drive by the church all the time. So yeah, and I knew your predecessor, but this is the first time we've met, which kind of shake my head and go, how did the last 5 years go by without us meeting each other? Very strange, but that's the way time rolls around here. So, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about the disciples and what kind of your background, your polity is, what life is like there, and then we'll talk a little bit about what it's like being a female minister around here. Right.
Well, I'm third generation Disciples of Christ pastor.
Okay.
My parents, as well as my grandparents on my mother's side, were ordained Disciples of Christ pastors. They served as missionaries in Japan, where I was born. Wow. And so it's in my blood. It's all I've known. Yeah. The Disciples of Christ are congregationally autonomous. So we call our own pastors. We send out our own missionaries that we support collectively. We are affiliated by covenant and not necessarily by any kind of judicatory regulations.
Right.
And so each congregation tends to take on its own flavor, its own personality. We're part of the Stone Campbell movement, and here in the Joplin area, that's very well known because there are a lot of independent Christian churches that we share a history. A lot of the polity is still the same, but you won't find women in ministry in the independent Christian churches as a rule.
As a rule, yeah. So you're a little bit of a rebel too.
I suppose I would be in this area.
In this area, yeah. Actually, I've worked with several Disciples of Christ ministers. Actually, a husband and wife team when I was in Cape Girardeau. And actually, after they got called to work at your headquarters, I guess, in Indianapolis, yeah.
Yes.
After they took a call to go there and work, while they were vacant, I got to one Sunday morning, right before I moved here, I got to preach there one Sunday morning because I was the guest. I was the guest preacher there when I was serving on the campus over at Southeast, and a nice group of people, and of course several of the people who taught on the campus were members there and things like that. So it was a fun day. It was a fun morning. It's always kind of entertaining to go into somebody else's place and see how they do stuff. So
it is. Yeah. It's fun.
So what's a typical Sunday look like for you guys at South Joplin Christian?
It starts at 8 o'clock for me. We have an elders meeting every Sunday at 8 o'clock, and our group
That's
of elders and pastors. Well, I thought it was brutal until after the first few meetings, and I realized how vital it is.
Yeah,
it really
well,
helps to keep the leadership of the congregation in touch with the needs of the congregation, what's happening. We always start out with prayer and with the general pastoral care concerns of the congregation. We focus on sometimes administrative issues that might need some attention, and I really count on their counsel. One of my responsibilities in the congregation is administration, and the eldership helps to serve as a sounding board for me many times, and I am truly grateful for their leadership.
That doesn't sound so brutal then. It actually sounds pretty supportive.
We study together. we read books together. It's a really good way to start the Sunday morning. Then at 9:30 we have our adult and children's education hour, and generally I teach the adult class or lead or facilitate the adult class. We tend to be much more discussion oriented than lecture formats, so once the conversation gets going, I rarely have...
Just kind of step back a little bit and see where it goes. Yeah.
Yes. As long as I don't talk too much, then there's plenty of room for others.
I share that cross. That's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
Then we have worship at 10:45, just one service. Not a large congregation, so I don't have to have several services throughout the day like many of my other pastoral colleagues in town that have more than one. I came from a church where we had 2 services with Sunday school in between, and that was rough. So I feel like I'm a little bit pampered right now not to have that.
Yeah, well, everybody deserves a little pampering. That's not bad. That's not bad. So take it while it lasts, sister. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah. So, I know in your congregation and in your group, the disciples, that again, like I've worked with many different, women pastors. Your predecessor Jill. We worked with many folks. So in your denomination, that's not unusual to have women pastors at all.
No, actually, I had to go back and look at the history. 1888 was the year that the first female was ordained in the Christian church, and of course we weren't the disciples of Christ at that time. That title was not taken on until 1968. But at the time, Clara Hale Babcock was the first woman who was ordained, and she served 4 churches over her lifetime and had something like 400 baptisms. I don't know. She was quite the evangelist.
She was a force of nature.
Yes, she was
a force of nature.
Yes, and my mother and grandmother were both ordained with their husbands when they were going into missions, but their standing as ordained ministers is equated with anyone who is serving as a pastor as well. Right. So there's no differentiation in their standing.
Yeah, neat. Now, are you doing the same thing in this generation?
As
co-pastoring, with that. Yeah.
I started out co-pastoring with my first husband. Yeah. He's deceased now, okay. So we were both co-pastoring much in the same footsteps. When my parents returned from Japan, my father went into pastoral ministry or congregational ministry, and Mom served somewhat as his assistant. I think they if the circumstances would have been different, they probably would have hired her as a co-pastor, but
Sure.
she served in a variety of roles. Great role model for me and for other young women who looked to their relationship as a very egalitarian model for
Yeah.
families, for congregations, so for society, a good role model.
Well, I just say, even theoretically, I love the model in so many ways, because it's just kind of like, it's kind of like a husband and wife team. I mean, it's a great way to take care of other families in your community. That's just it's kind of neat, when you stop and you think about it. Now, I got to say, this morning is the first time where I've learned that that's the way that happened in so many ways. I just thought I just happened to know a lot of husband and wife ministry teams through the years. I didn't realize that was actually kind of almost built into your system, which is kind of impressive.
Well, there are certainly a lot of women in the disciples that are either married to spouses that are not in ministry and or are not married at all. But there are a fair number of clergy spouses and couples as well.
Well, like I say, probably the closest couple I've worked with were a couple that worked in Cape Girardeau. Phil and Stephanie were both ministers at the church, but then Stephanie also taught at the university, so we taught together at the university. And first I went in a lot as a kind of a guest lecturer in her class, and then eventually I got hired like a year after her to take. We all taught world religions, and then we taught some other stuff along the way, depending on what our interest and our expertise was. And so we had a good time. So I was kind of, like I say, I was a little sad when they left Cape Girardeau, but what the heck? They got called somewhere else and took that call, and
that's the way it works.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I keep remembering. I keep kind of like musing on the fact that I've been in Joplin now for 13 years. And one of these days, I know the bishop's going to say, "Now we're not called to a particular way. We're sent."
Sent, yes.
Yeah, whereas it's a little different little mechanism there.
Yes.
But I know it's going to happen one of these days when the bishop says, "Okay, Jay, it's really time. I need to send you now somewhere else," because that's how I got this job, to come here from Cape Girardeau. My bishop at that time said to me, "I need you to be in Joplin," and I'm like, well, what if I've got these other ideas, I've got these other things going. And he was like, yeah, but I need you to be in Joplin. So I'm sending you to Joplin. And I'm like, okay, that's the way it's going to be. So what's it like to be called instead of sent? Talk about that a minute.
As you spoke about what it might look like for your bishop to send you, I'm recalling that I've tell my congregations that my call story had to do with coming home from church when I was a college student and spending time in my dorm room praying about God's direction for my life. And what I heard in my heart was, be ready to leave your family and friends and go wherever I send you. And that was very difficult for me to imagine being alone, being sent someplace unfamiliar. It was frightening, but I remember realizing that I had to say yes. And at the time, I understood that to be going into missions, and so I followed in my parents' and grandparents' footsteps and did an internship in Japan, where I quickly found out that I was not called to ministry as a missionary. And returned to the United States and ended up actually investing my life in becoming a wife and mother and good layperson in the church. But in terms of being called, I think I trust the partnership of the congregation perhaps more implicitly, because we come to the table and decide, are we a good fit for each other, rather than a judicatory individual assessing that. And for me, it was a very positive experience of being able to come to Joplin. I actually came as a transitional minister for the first year, and then stayed after that.
Well, good. Hey, we're going to take a quick break real fast. My guest this morning, Reverend Dr. Colleen Carroll, is the pastor of South Joplin Christian. We're going to be right back after a quick break.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Well, Well, again, thanks for being with us on another Sunday morning. This morning we're talking to the Reverend Dr. Colleen Carroll, who's the pastor at South Joplin Christian, and we've just been talking about the difference between being sent and called. I will tell you, I have to laugh though, even though you were talking about that experience of being called and figuring out what you needed to do in the middle of all that. I remember when I was leaving the St. Louis area, I grew up in North St. Louis County, Florissant, and when I was being pulled, to the Mission Diocese of Southern Missouri, our territory in the Springfield, Cape Girardeau, I remember sitting there praying one night, and I remember distinctly saying, if I go to Southern Missouri, because I had other options and looking at things, and I could have stayed in St. Louis, but I just felt this pull, and I sat there and I went to myself, and if I go to Southern Missouri, I don't know anybody there. You're the only one I'm going to be able to depend on. And I went, oh. That's what you wanted me to figure out. Okay, I guess it's Southern Missouri then. Here I go. And that's
right.
So I find I love call stories for that reason, because we're just all like, and it's just like we all get to these little moments where we're like going, what do we do? And then all of a sudden it goes, all right, I get it.
Exactly.
I can go do it. And then sometimes when you think, like you were talking about, trying that mission call and just feeling, oh, okay, no, the call is really more in this other direction at this point in time. Call to be, mom, call to be, lay minister in the church, if you will, and then now look at you. It's just, God kind of like writes straight with those crooked lines.
I won't say that I didn't fight the call either.
Oh, I'm not saying that.
There's plenty of resistance.
Yeah. I always laugh when people talk about their nice, sweet, gentle relationships with God. Mine looks more like wrestling. I'm just saying, it's like more like wrestling. Yeah, exactly. And I got the hip to prove it. So yeah. But that's exactly the way I feel about it. It's just like sometimes it's just like I got to get in there and do it. But when we get finished with it, we're both. I think we're both okay. When we get finished with it.
Wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, he can't have it any other way with me. He should have made me different if he'd have wanted it that way. God should have made me different. So, here you are, female minister in this area, and again, like you say, you guys are much rarer than we fellows are. Okay, do you find that difficult? Do you find it unique? Do you find it gives you a special niche? How does that work for you?
I won't say that it's difficult. It is unique. And especially since there's nothing that identifies me as a pastor when I go out in public.
Sure. You
wear
dress like that.
Street clothes.
I can give you one of these. I was just kidding.
I know. Rather not, if you don't mind.
I know.
But unless someone introduces me, or sometimes when my husband calls me out, we'll be in a store and he'll say, "Oh, my wife is the pastor," and I think, "Oh darn, I'm exposed." But generally, it's certainly not a problem area. Rarely, if at all, if I'm making a hospital call or if I am trying to act in a professional role where I'm not readily recognized as a pastor, they might question me, but I've never been prevented from being able to, enter a hospital room as soon as I identify myself as a pastor.
I would hope our hospitals have enough. Because many of them have also some female ministers, but but again, many of them are doing hospital ministry and things like that because they didn't experience a call from a particular congregation or found that they had better avenues and better opportunities to do ministry in some of those settings.
I would say perhaps the greatest difficulty is sometimes in ecumenical relationships, where other denominations that do not recognize female clergy are reluctant to allow me the same the courtesies that they might offer a fellow male clergy. And that doesn't happen for me very often in Joplin. There are actually 2 pastors on staff at South Joplin Christian Church, and my cohort is Pastor Catherine Wilson, and she is responsible for all of our outreach ministries beyond the congregation. I work mostly with preaching and teaching and pastoral care, administration, and she's making sure that our other hand is involved in the community. And so she's the one that really is doing more in meeting other congregations, other ministries in the Joplin area. So I would say she probably has a more at stake in terms of being recognized and honored as a pastor. But she's also in circles where the need is usually so great that they're not as concerned about making sure that the credentials are equivalent to the credentials in other denominations.
And we all have, I mean, this is one thing, I just don't know whether people realize this or not, but we've all got different requirements for our own denominations.
Yes, we do. Yes,
you know,
we do.
and I mean, they're different things. I mean, for some it's as simple as a simple call, whereas others, they weren't going to turn me loose until I had, not only 4 years of undergrad, but then, 4.5 years of grad school to go along with it. I mean, they don't even turn us, we don't let anybody loose until they've had that.
That's right.
And again, the requirements differ according to the denomination of what they require.
Right.
So I mean, anybody can call their own pastor and put them in place and do what they're going to do. I mean, that's up to that particular group to do, and it's up to each group to determine its own requirements.
Right.
But
in fact, that's something that I sometimes will point out when, if I'm challenged or if someone asks me, how can you be a female pastor if the Bible says that you can't, women aren't supposed to preach and teach? And one of the things that I sometimes say, if I just have a short response, is, my sheep hear my voice. And I'm not called to pastor the people who don't want or can't respect a woman as a minister.
Wow.
The people that I pastor to are generally quite relieved and grateful for the opportunity to model something that is important to us, and that is a more egalitarian understanding of the ministry of the laity and the whole congregation being on equal footing. So I've had people in my church that have come back after visiting another church per se, and they might come back and say, boy, it is really great to be home and to see a model of more egalitarian ministry and congregational life lived, and they just appreciate that.
I whenever I do get a chance to hear one of my female colleagues preach, I'm just always very much aware that comes from, it comes from the same spot, but it just comes with such a different lens. And I always appreciate myself hearing a woman reflect on the Word of God, simply because I think that she proclaims it differently than I do because of her particular gifts and talents and the way she's made, in so many ways. And I have a tendency to appreciate that. I don't get to have it happen very often, but when I do, to me that's always that's just always an interesting moment, because I'm just kind of like, I'm just amazed at how, again, it's the same gospel, same passage, whatever, but most of the time coming at it from just a little bit of a different twist, different angle. And it's always so interesting to hear that.
I think it's an example of what happens each time an individual hears the word. They're hearing it from their perspective, their lens. I know that in my seminary in particular, we were taught to listen from the margins. And so even though I was very privileged to be able to come from a denomination where women were accepted, I was quickly reminded that that comes at a price, and there were other women who are still looking for that right. That then opened my eyes to, how are people of color hearing the scriptures? How is the LGBTQ community hearing the scriptures? How are people who are living in poverty? All of the different margins. Each time people hear the scriptures, they're going to hear it from their perspective. And so as I preach, even though I might be thinking about my role as a female pastor in a particular passage, I'm also trying to keep all of these other conversations in my mind to be sure that I'm not coloring it to the scripture to my own advantage.
Right, right, and I think of course that's a temptation for anybody who picks up the scriptures and does it. It's part of our human, our human temptation to, form God in our image and likeness.
Absolutely, absolutely.
As opposed to the other way around, where we're supposed to be formed in God's image and likeness. But again, that passage from Genesis, male and female, He created them. And it's part of that mysterious plan that somehow there are some differences and there are some ways that we approach it. And
then along comes Paul and says that there's no more male or female or slave or free, and now what do we do?
We're still fighting about that, aren't we? Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. And in those things, I know that there are folks out there that would find it difficult, to listen to you.
Yes.
Even again, here I am, a Catholic priest, so we don't ordain women.
Right.
But I got news for you: if it were not for our women, we wouldn't get anything done. I mean, I'll tell you that. I often think about Sister Diane, who's one of my pastoral associate here at St. Peter's in Joplin, and she also served down at St. Canaris in Neosho and Seneca and Knoll as well. So she was at one time she was pastoral associate for all those places back 30 years ago, and Diane just celebrated 40 years in her religious community, and Diane, I think when she was younger, she might have wanted to be a priest at some point in time or thought that she should. But now she's like, oh, Jay, I wouldn't want to be tied into that for anything in the world. You are so tied down, and you got to, she said, whereas I've got the freedom to be able to, to do what I want to do and how I want to do that.
Being content with where we are placed is a true gift.
Yeah. So if they're going to look for you at South Joplin Christian, Reverend Dr. Colleen Carroll is the senior pastor there, and I'm just I'm so grateful you come and join me this morning for the conversation. It's always just fun to to do some things around. It'd be fun sometime to bat around maybe a theological issue. That'd be a lot of fun.
I'm game.
All right, good. As I do that with some of the other folks in the area, I know it's Aaron Brown over at St. Paul's. Aaron and I, sometimes he picks it, I ask him, pick a topic, he'll pick a topic. So last time I think we did suffering. Woo! And it was a great show because we were just having fun, just talking with each other about all those things.
So suffering is fun.
No, we did not say that. We did not say that.
Okay, good.
So we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Don't go away.
Lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer deaths in the U.S., and now we have an effective tool to screen for it. A low-dose CT uses a lower amount of radiation than a standard chest CT.
Breathe in.
Better detailed pictures than a chest x-ray of small abnormal areas of the lung. A person must be between 55 to 77 years old, asymptomatic, which means they don't have any symptoms such as coughing up blood, chronic cough, shortness of breath, unusual weight loss, or any other worrisome symptoms. They must also be a current smoker or have quit within the past 15 years, also must have a 30-pack year history or more, which equates to smoking 1 pack a day for 30 years, or 2 packs a day for 15 years. People generally avoid these scans possibly due to fear of what could be found. Like many other cancers, if we can detect lung cancer early, it could be very treatable and life-saving.
Well, again, thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning of Faith in Our Hometown. My guest this morning has been the Reverend Dr. Colleen Carroll, who is the pastor at South Joplin Christian Church. I just really want to say, on behalf of all of my colleagues, in ministry from across all the different denominations here in the Joplin area, I have to say it is a cordial group most of the time. Very rarely have I ever met with contention from somebody from another group. Most of the time we can laugh and enjoy and share our stories of ministry and just get to the point where we can share what it's like to serve in the Lord's vineyard here in the greater Joplin area. So I hope that you can find some good play in that vineyard today on this Sunday. I hope you're still getting ready for church and going wherever you're going to go today and spending however you're going to do it, but at least spend it with loved ones and around a table where it really matters. And I hope you find the Lord, our love there. So God bless. Come back and join us again next week for Faith in Our Hometown.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.